conducting this meeting remotely to prevent the spread of COVID, the city is providing options for the public to attend the telephone, internet, and other means of remote access, and also provides the ability for persons attending the meeting not in person to hear each other and at the same time hear each other at the same time. Well, I didn't end that well. So now that we've called this meeting to order, I would ask that you join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. We have a lengthy meeting scheduled for tonight with a number of items on it. So let's, Mr. Clausen, you have something for the good of the order?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, if I may, I wanted to report to the rest of the council that the Finance Committee had with the state auditor, the exit conference this afternoon for the audit that they just completed. And number one, the audit this year covered a number of things, the use of basically restricted funds, tracking and monitoring theft of small and attractive assets, security IT policies, basically an accountability audit, and a federal audit for our projects. And I'm finishing my 39th year on the council, and I've been on the Finance Committee since I first got on the council. And this is probably the best audit that we've had in my 39 years. They basically had zero comments, which is unheard of. I mean, they didn't even have any suggestions. So I just wanted to share that with the council, recognize Noah and his team in finance, and as well as all the other directors of following the policy, but especially Noah, thank you very, very much for a fantastic audit.
Yes, well done.
John, thanks for that. I would just add one thing as we go to our first item tonight, right, is just a level of confidence we can all have about the accuracy of the data that's being shared with us in that regard. So thanks again to everybody.
Mm-hmm. Something definitely to put on the website to make sure people know that.
Great job.
Banner.
Yep. Well done. All right. So with that, let's we have a public hearing on the mid-biennial review and modifications to the budget. Noah, let's kick this off.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council. As established by RCW 35A 34130, a mid-biennial review of the biennial budget is required. This review shall occur no sooner than September 1st and no later than December 31st. The Finance Department has consulted and reviewed possible modifications of our biennial budget with all the city departments and the mayor. And the Finance Committee has met and reviewed the proposed modifications to the budget prior to this work study session. I want to emphasize for the public as well as other council members that there's additional material available from that Finance Committee meeting from the 12th. And it was also Zoom recorded if you have additional questions. It was a 2-hour meeting where we reviewed all the modifications in depth. So another great source to go to if you have questions. Now for the mid-biennial review, the city has focused its criteria for the mid-year modifications to those items that were corrections, those that were required, and items that are large capital or large budgetary impacts. So tonight we are going to review the budget amendment / modifications that reflect in detail. So the first adjustment we're proposing to modify is really considered a cleanup effort. And by cleanup effort, I mean these are recognizing and updating the budget to reflect actions taken by the council, which amount to roughly $13.5 million.
You know what? Can you share your screen for this presentation?
Oh, thank you, Mayor. I thought I was. Shoot. I have to start over.
Well, not completely over. Just back up just a little bit.
There we go. This should make more sense now. So sorry, I'll just back up. Again, the cleanup effort is going to focus on this $13.5 million of expenditures already incurred or actions already taken by council. The next area of focus, where we'll spend most of our time talking about, our new expenditures that total roughly $7 million. And for your convenience throughout the document, we actually have that bolded, and I'll point that out as we move along here. The last piece is the revenue adjustments that amount to roughly $29 million, with $5.5 million being adjustments to the beginning fund balance or truing up our fund balance. Another $7 million truing up realized revenues. And the last part is truing up grants and loans received. So the revenue section is really truing up all the revenue year to date for a biennial budget. So before we get started, staff would recommend that the mayor open the public hearing and allow us to dive into the material. And I believe at the end of the presentation and discussion, we would take questions and comments from the public and then close the hearing.
Normally, we would open and close the public hearing. So I would recommend you give your presentation first, then I would open the public hearing and then close the public hearing. Do you not concur, Charlie?
So normally we would open the public hearing, we'd have the presentation, then we'd have
Okay.
our comments from the public.
Okay, all right. Well, with that, I will open the public hearing, and Noah, go ahead and proceed with your presentation.
Great. Okay. So moving ahead, we're going to turn to the first page in the packet. The first page at the top shows highlights of the 2021, that's a mistype there. Should be 21-22 mid-biennial review. But I want to set this up so it's clear as we kind of walk through here. What we did is we set this up first organized by operations and capital, and then identified within those categories which fund is being impacted. So on this first page, you can see this is regarding governmental operational funds, and the fund being impacted is our 001 current expense fund. On this page again, I want to also point out here are the bolded categories or expense requests. And again, the bold are all new requests. All the non-bolded are expenses that have already incurred or that council has approved throughout the year. So I'm going to start with the first total of all these adjustments, both already approved and new requests total roughly $1.6 million. And since all the non-bolded have already been approved, I'm going to spend most of our time tonight focusing on the new requests. And so with this, I'd like to actually ask the mayor to talk about the Small Business Development Center as one of the first new requests.
Yeah. And my plan is, for the sake of time, is just to hit these larger bolded items and give you explanation. And if you want something more than what I offer, please don't hesitate to ask. So the Small Business Development Center is housed, it's the lending institutions in Kitsap County, primarily Kitsap Bank and other banks, and as well as the jurisdictions in North Kitsap, a couple of years ago created this entity, and it's a resource for our small businesses. It's been crucial through COVID and all the grant support and opportunities that are out there for our businesses that don't know how to apply for these or fill out these applications or government processes. So they came to the Economic Development Committee about 6 months ago, explained what it is they do, and so this request, all the cities in Kitsap County, if we fund this, will be contributing $10,000 to this operation. And I think it's a valuable resource to the small businesses in our community. The others are fairly small in the next group, but the derelict vessel destruction is worth pointing out. And we've got some dollars, I believe about $45,000 in the current budget. We know we've got one boat out there that's going to take about 35,000 to raise. We've asked the police to step up their efforts related to the seizure and destruction of these derelict boats out there. And so the discussion with the finance committee was an additional $50,000 to get us through 2022. And I certainly hope that's enough. If it's not, we'll be talking again, but this is activity that needs to happen. Nix DCD software for 10,000.
Mayor, I believe we have a question.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go
Councilman
ahead,
I
John.
was just going to make a comment for clarification. The $50,000, not all of the vessels that need to be removed from the waterfront are going to be $35,000. That's generally only when they are sitting on the bottom. If
Yes,
they're still floating, it's significantly less. So we should be able to do a fair amount with these dollars.
absolutely right, correct. And we're intending to be more proactive in this approach so that we're not raising them off the bottom, which is very expensive. Thank you, John. That's a good comment. Nick wants to be able to do more with online applications. Is that not correct? What this 10,000 represents, Nick?
Yes, that is correct. We're looking to go to the same online application system that the county uses.
Okay, so that's a software purchase to allow our development community to submit their applications online. We want to advance designs, or excuse me, the sub-area plan for the Bethel Sedgwick area. Nick submitted 2 sub-area plans. I felt that we needed to pick one, just bandwidth issues, and maybe if we can get far enough into the work plan and we don't have any staffing problems, that we could potentially add the other one in too. The 2 choices were one in front of the mall area there on Mile Hill. The other was the Bethel Sedgwick area, and due to our grant applications that we're applying for the Bethel Sedgwick area, I felt this would strengthen those applications if we created the sub area plan in there. So that was why I selected the one that I did, but that's always up for debate if you wish to. That's just planning efforts related to code updates. And then there's the Rice Fergus Miller contract. That's really pass-through dollars for the next phase of design on the community center. So that's the Public Facilities District dollars, the 600,000 as we advance the designs, and then we'll be reimbursed. But we have to call them out on our budget since the dollars pass through our checkbook. So questions on this section before we move on? Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Noah.
Okay, so we'll move on to the next fund. So again, that was the General Fund 001. We're gonna move on to the City Street Fund. Again, we're focusing on the bold, and if you have questions on the non-bold, please raise your hand and we'll call upon you. The big expense request, the total is 1.85 million. But the big request is really an increase to street preservation maintenance of $1 million. So we are taking more of our general fund dollars and applying it towards our street fund to increase our preservation and maintenance. And I believe this was a priority discussed at the council retreat. And so we're honoring the council's request and building that into this budget amendment here.
See, Scott
Yeah.
has his hand raised.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I tried to get it up before you transitioned to this slide. I just wanted to be clear, and I apologize if I didn't understand. The Small Business Development Center, is this brand new or are we supplementing?
It is expanding their scope and abilities.
Okay, and
And
so
their
I just
bandwidth.
wanted, okay, and so I wanted to ask, where could I learn more about the Small Business Development Center? Where would I go online to find that?
Kitsap Regional Library is where they're housed. And that's a good question, Scott. But I believe you would Google Small Business Development Center is what they're called. And
Big
so the
Kitsap,
Chamber of
okay.
Commerce's know about it. KEDA knows about it. They're really kind of the go-to group for getting information about grants and federal processes, SBA loans. They're just things that our small businesses aren't experts at and need help with those processes and applications.
Okay, thank you.
Beck, I see your hand raised.
Yes, and I too am still on the first section.
Okay, no problem.
I was hoping that Nick could just tell us about, because he had asked for 2 sub-area plans, and we put one in this budget, and we have one then that would still yet to be done. And I was wanting Nick just to fill the council in on the timing of those in relationship to our comprehensive plan update.
Thank you, Beck. You bring up a good point, and this really ties into our next agenda item tonight, the countywide planning policies. Under the centers framework in the new countywide planning policies, we have now what are called candidate countywide centers. And countywide centers are priorities for regional transportation investment, not necessarily the regional pot of money, but just transportation investment in our region, as well as areas where we want to focus growth. And so both of these centers are identified as candidate countywide centers, which means that we have until our 2024 update to prepare a comprehensive plan element or sub-area plan addressing sort of what sort of growth is intended in these areas. So if we want to maintain our status as a candidate countywide center, we have to put together that plan within the next 2 years, which is why we put both of those projects forward.
But if it was delayed even to next year, as long as we included the next biennial budget, we should have time to complete that work, correct?
It's going to be difficult because we have to do both our critical areas code update and our entire comprehensive plan update. And so if we're going to try to work the sub-area plans in, we really need to get a head start on those tasks. And it's not the end of the world if one of those ceases to become a countywide center. It just means we have to put the plan together later and then apply to KRCC to be put back on the list.
It is possible to add this halfway through the year this year if revenue continues to be strong.
Right, and as you mentioned, Mayor, revenue is one resource we need, and the other one is the human resources. I just wanted council aware of the choices we're making there.
Thank you. Other questions? I jumped ahead we jumped ahead there. I just want to make sure everybody gets your questions answered on this section, and we'll go through it section by section. We ready to move ahead? Okay. All right.
All right, so moving back again to the street fund. $1 million is the big ticket item. Are there other items for the street fund and that anyone has a question on? So just take a second, take a look, and we'll.
Just to point out, I think that's essentially doubling our previous budget annually.
Pretty close. Yes. And everybody's passionate about street trees. I just want to call those street trees out. We did that section of roadway between Kitsap Street and DeKalb. We had quite a bit of water intrusion, and about a third of those trees died. And so the plan is, since we got a beautiful new street and some new sidewalk ramps, let's put some new trees in there too that all match.
And the snow and ice requests are anticipated. Winter's coming, and we're anticipating those expenses. In the transportation element plan update, I believe this was a DCD and Public Works co-request.
Questions?
Are you asking me to speak to that particular project, or
Not unless there's questions.
I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
So I believe this is actually an increase in what was already budgeted, not a new item. This is to start work on the transportation element of the comprehensive plan, which we have to do as part of our 2024 update. And so we had some money budgeted, and we're in the process of procuring a consultant for this. And it's apparent that we're going to need to increase this slightly to complete that work. So this is what we will we'll start updating our model and then begin diving into that plan element update.
And I will mention this because again, we talked about the revenues being a lot of true up efforts. And so you'll see these first three expenditures that have already been approved are all grant related. So they do have offsetting revenue. So they should be net zero neutral to the city. But from a budgeting perspective, again, we need to budget the expenditures and recognize the revenues coming in. The Sydney repairs and sidewalks, that's that large project on Sydney that's been going on and it has concluded. The total cost is right around $420,000, but it's being split between the street fund and storm and sewer funds. So you'll see this particular item pop up again a couple of times throughout this presentation. Okay, then that concludes the operational for our 001 and 002, or for our governmental funds. Now we're going to talk about our governmental funds that have capital construction dollars. We have two funds on the governmental side. We have our 302 capital construction fund, which is more general construction activity. And then we have our specific street capital construction fund. And again, I think I'll ask the mayor to talk about the general 302 funds, new requests here. Again, these larger expenditures above, again, are just recognizing actions councils are taking. So we have the Kitsap Bank property purchase of $2.5 million. We have approved a purchase sale agreement. We are working through that process with the bank, as well as securing, we've already secured funding through the PFD, as well as Department of Commerce. So we will have our portion of that purchase, a local portion to that purchase, I should say. So we are still working through that process on the purchase of the bank property.
These bolded items, the first one, that is siding replacement. When we bought the building DCD, moved into, we thought, well, it's going to be a short-term solution, and it's looking more like a long-term solution, because I don't think we're going to add on to the footprint of City Hall when we do the roof and the siding. So, but the siding on the back of Nick's building is failing, and so we need to side it and paint it, and construction costs are pretty high. So I think we've got, for 20,000, we put plenty of money into that. And I see Fred's hand raised. Do you have a question?
I do. Do you know if the key cards will also include the ability to just punch in a code?
They won't, and I'll get to that particular item here in just a moment. So the electric charging stations we're going to purchase a couple of our traditional Go4s, or of a type of the tricycle type vehicle that you see our public works water meter readers drive, and parking enforcement. And they make a little safer version that's four-wheel and electric versus gas powered. And so we're planning on buying two of those. And so we need to have a charging station for City Hall, and also one up at the Public Workshop to accommodate us bringing those electric vehicles into our fleet. Also, we, at the council's direction, we expanded the footprint of the solar array, and we think there's an opportunity to get a grant and get that all or a good portion of that solar array paid for through a grant, but it takes some outside help to do that. So we're putting money into the budget to hire somebody to pursue a grant for us that could likely pay for that solar array as part of the City Hall remodel. And the City Hall key card project isn't really changing how it works. It's adding more access points in City Hall, from the server room to the vault. Instead, we're just trying to eliminate more keys and have more control over who access places and who has access to places. I know it's a little cumbersome to always come in the back door at the council chambers. We have 4 sets of doors. One of the doors is going to have a key card option, but the technology we've gone to doesn't have a keypad option. It's truly cards. And go ahead, Councilmember Clausen.
Well, I was just going to add, for the council's benefit, the Finance Committee, in going through this, suggested that we add to the list and add the active club building. Actually, the mayor had some in there. We has to add more money to it. mainly because, over the years, it's been a staff challenge to administer access to and from that building. And we're rekeying the building frequently because people aren't turning keys in or losing keys and whatever. What we thought we would have sufficient dollars to do the active club, the mayor and staff have determined that it's going to take quite a bit more. So the finance committee basically wanted to throw it before the whole council to see if that's something that we want to increase so that we can include the active building or not. And I know the mayor has an opinion on it as well. So I just wanted to introduce that portion of it.
Yeah, and so of that 50, 38 is the proposed improvements that we're discussing, which would be City Hall, additional access points, and doing the DCD building. And it sounded like a great idea at the finance committee about a month ago to add another 12,000 to this 50,000 to do the active club. When we got the quote, it's $30,000. And if you guys think that's good to do, we'll do it. We spend $1,000 or $2,000 a year rekeying it, and it is inconvenient for staff, or actually it's quite burdensome for staff, the issuance of keys, collecting keys. So we would have better control over the building, but I'm just uncertain about a $30,000 expenditure. Councilmember Cacciardi?
Yeah, just to make sure we're talking about the same math, the other two items were 38. You already had put 12 in there to get to the 50.
Yes.
That's actually going to be 30, so a total of 68,000 would be needed to be shown in that bucket.
Another
18.
Another 18.
Not another 30.
Correct. Another 18 to get us to the correct. So I just want your thoughts. And so if we either need to back this down by 12 or add 18 to it, and it's really your call, and we're looking for some direction from you. Councilmember Shang?
For the active club, have you considered the residential keypad, which is internet operated? You can change the keypad codes remotely.
I just don't know that would add any more efficiency than having the issuing the keys that we're doing.
Well, you wouldn't have to have a key or a card issued. You could offer a code to someone, and every time they access it, you would get an entry. It may not be as robust as this, but it would be a lot cheaper.
Yeah. Part of why this was so expensive on that building is there's so many access points to the building, and putting some sort of a control on all the different access points to the building. It wasn't that was a piece of the challenge. So Councilmember Clausen?
I would only add to Councilmember Chang's suggestion. I have 2 of those keypad locks on my house, and they work well, but I don't know if they're ruggedized enough that would handle the frequency that would be used at the active club. And also, one of the downside is that they're powered by batteries that frequently need to be replaced. So, whereas if we did the key card, I appreciate it's way more expensive, but it's going to be relatively permanent, and it's pretty much trouble-free. And I guess I would, since nobody else is commenting, I personally wouldn't have the problem of going ahead and adding to this so that we can do it. I know that it's been a hassle for staff for years dealing with the administration of access to that building, and even recognizing that the community center is going to fill a lot of, I believe, additional need. There's still going to be, I think, a lot of use in that building, whether it's by the different youth organizations that use it, or, the quilting and the wood carvers and the AA folks. There's a number of different organizations that have used that over the years. So I would offer that up unless somebody has objections.
Councilmember Cacciardi?
Mayor, could we use any of the, unobligated ARPA funds for something like this?
Not ARPA money, no.
Not ARPA money, doesn't qualify. Thank you.
No, it'd be coming out of our general fund.
Yeah, I don't have any headache over it as well. I could support it.
So I'm hearing two in support, or heads nodding. We need to add another 18,000. Is that what I'm hearing?
I got my thumb up.
Okay, geez. Okay, any objections? I'm seeing Cindy saying, shaking her head no. That's the only no I'm seeing. So it sounds like we're gonna find another 18,000.
I'm kind of neutral on it. Yeah,
I am as well, and I also have one of those keypads that we use at my place, and it's used several times a day, and it seems to work pretty well. It's about 3 years old. It changes the batteries every couple years. It does eliminate the need for having to go get a key card, and you can change the code anytime you'd like, and I'm sure that there is an industrial version of that available. So I'm kind of on the fence about that as well.
I don't know that we should.
What brand you got, because I go through batteries probably at least twice, if not 3 times a year. I must
Wow,
have the brand.
Yeah, I would caution about not doing anything. If we're going to do this, do it under the platform that we have. So we have one system and one system to manage. Otherwise, we're creating something else to manage and additional work. It isn't creating efficiency. So I'm hearing some indifferent. Most of you, it sounds like you're in favor. I'm indifferent myself. I just looking for direction.
When you said there's multiple access points, how many are there?
4. So we have to do something to know whether or not the doors are open or closed.
yeah. If we got the keypads, could you make them different? Because isn't downstairs basically used by the athletic groups and
Yeah.
not the upstairs groups, so that you could
I don't
segregate
think we're
a
doing
little-
anything to the downstairs. There's 4 access points upstairs, I'm told.
Okay.
The ones I have on my house, each door is set differently. So you could give people a different code. You don't have to give them all the same code for each door.
Can we please park whether we're going to go to a residential? Are we going to take out 18,000 or add it? Which direction are we going? I'm not going to tell I'm not going to micromanage Public Works what system to use. It sounds like we want to do this.
Well, I think you raise a good point about if we're going to do it, and I'm leaning more to doing it, although it's not hard and fast, only because for a number of years I listened to the staff talk about the hassles they have in administering access. I would really like your comment about let's use the same system everywhere.
I'm okay with that too, and there will be a maybe a cost efficiency in having the same contractor do them all at once.
Last comments or questions? Sounds like we're adding 18,000, Noah. All right. The next group of, are we fine with any questions on that capital construction before we step into street capital? Okay.
Okay.
And we've got a couple of designs that we're wanting to advance. One is the multimodal design on Old Clifton between the current roundabout and the proposed roundabout at McCormick Woods Drive, so that we can design that and move that element of the Old Clifton improvements forward, so that we can get folks to and from our park safely and the McCormick Village development. So the other is
And a reminder that the original budget for this TIP 1.5A Old Clifton Road had $450,000 in it. Council then reappropriated that money from reappropriated $200,000 to our 2.04 Bethel Sedgwick design. So this 200,000 is really restoring what was originally budgeted and originally envisioned by the council when we set the biennial budget.
yeah, good point, Noah. So then the next is advancing design dollars for the Bethel Phase 1 design, in particular, the Blueberry roundabout. So we're going to select a consultant to do the entire corridor from Salmondary to Bethel, but only fund that Blueberry piece first, so we can advance our designs and pursue grant for that particular intersection. That we have some mitigation dollars that were put that we can use for match.
And a good note for council, this project in particular, we have already received $234,000 from a developer earlier in the year for this purpose. So the additional $116,000 to complete this design phase, it would come from REIT. But we're trying to use the dollars we already have that are already restricted for this purpose and get them moving along on design.
I only have one minor kind of picky thing. If we could add Blueberry to this description, I think it would help people understand what it's about a little bit easier.
Good comment.
Yep, I'm making a note there.
Okay. Ready to move on to the next section?
Okay, so that completes our governmental capital adjustments. Again, you see we got roughly $3 million on the general construction side and another $3 million on the street capital construction side. So now we're going to move on and look at our enterprise funds. Again, these are our water utility, our sewer utility, and our storm utility. First, we're going to look at the water capital fund. And I guess the first two requests, I just want to point out that these are being proposed to be funded from our ARPA dollars. To remind council, we received $1.4 million of the American Rescue Plan Act earlier this year. And water capital infrastructure projects is an appropriate use of those dollars. It is a restricted funding source. So these are two significant projects that have been identified that we could use the money for and are being proposed to use the money for. The other two projects on this list were recently approved by the council as loans. So the Public Works Department brought that forward, I think, last week or last session. And so those are projects that are moving forward and we have identified the funding for it. So again, part of the cleanup effort for some of these. Mayor, did you want to talk about either of the ARPA projects at all?
Yeah, if I could. I think we've all discussed at length the 600,000 for the old Quipton design, but that 300,000 is new. The Finance Committee saw this request, and in talking to Public Works, we're at a 90% design on well 13. And we're waiting on our water rights through the Foster Pilot Program. And the thought is to get this to 100% design and now with these ARPA dollars versus waiting for the water rights, then completing the design. I think we can cut 6 to 9 months out of our delay to get to construction if we get this to ad ready design with these ARPA dollars. So that's what the thought is there. Questions? Okay.
Good. So the next enterprise we're going to look at is the sewer. First, we're going to look at sewer operations. Again, we have already completed the Pottery Sewer Lift Station approval of the loan at a prior council meeting. So again, this is just truing up that expense and bringing that here. Here are those Sydney repairs for that sewer project. The other half I was telling you about before. So again, just truing up what we've already incurred for that project. And then Public Works did request some additional funding for lift station repairs as they look forward. I understand that when one of these goes out, it can be $28,000. So very expensive. And so they want to be prepared to have enough expenditure authority to move forward. Moving on to the sewer capital. Again, the big dollar amount here is Marina Sewer Pump Station. So as a reminder, we did receive a $13 million loan appropriation from the state. We had already appropriated some monies in the biennial budget for this project. So this $5.2 million really brings us the total appropriation in the biennium to that $13 million. So now we have a $13 million loan as a revenue source and a full $13 million marina pump station project on our expenditure side. Now, I don't fully expect that project to be complete in the biennium, but it will help us track and keep our revenues in line with our expenses as we do move forward. Again, the next one is has already been approved by council, another loan that Public Works was able to get for improving our lift station controls. So again, just bringing that expenditure on the books to allow them to move forward with their projects. Any questions on the sewer side? Nope. Okay, so we're going to move on to our ENR fund. In the ENR fund, we have a total request of roughly $300,000. In discussions with mechanic, he has a need for some additional tools and equipment that amount to roughly $15,000. And then with all the additions of our new personnel that we've already hired, there is a need to get those personnel in their own trucks and vehicles to keep them moving and not having to share so many vehicles. So we got a request for an addition. And again, these are additions to the fleet, in addition to the Department of Community Development, in addition to our Parks Department. And maybe I'll ask the mayor to talk about this EV Max right here, as this is an interesting vehicle.
And that's related to that charging station I spoke to earlier, and it's that four-wheeled vehicle. We'll use it in our parks. We'll potentially use it for meter reading, and it has a little pickup box on the back. It's just much safer than the tricycle version. It's four-wheeled, and it's electric. So, so Beck, I see you have your hand raised.
I do. I was just, and maybe I'm going down a rabbit hole, but I was just wondering, with these 4 new trucks that we're purchasing, have we considered a policy for the electrification of our fleet? And would there be grant money available if we did so?
We've talked about that with our public works vehicles, and from an emergency management standpoint, it would be challenging for those vehicles to be electric, those trucks in particular. But we have talked about propane as an alternative in the future. But it would take some additional fueling facilities and things of that nature to be able to do that. But it is something we should and will be looking at in the future. But,
well, yeah, and I'll add to that. I'm not so sure on the safety side, as the mayor pointed out. I haven't looked into that, but we have talked about it. And the challenge right at this moment in time is that the Public Works Department needs these trucks, and there is not an EV truck out there on the market that we can go purchase. Now, in the future, we will definitely look at that. But as we sit here in 2022, hoping to get those trucks in 2022, late 2022, maybe leading into 2023, there's just not an EV truck out there. But we are aware that the EV market is changing, so those trucks will be available in the future and part of those plans.
So either electric or propane, but we will be looking at that. And then the vehicle before that, that $10,000 vehicle, we aren't getting a Highlander for $10,000 new, but the police department has a detective vehicle that we're repurposing. And so I believe is it back yet from being de-policed, chief? Because Nick's operation's chomping at the bit to have it. But anyway, so that's a $10,000 transfer to the police department budget to purchase that vehicle, and so that DCD can use it.
Yeah, and as a reminder, as a part of the ER&R policies, we cannot add any vehicles to the fleet without council approval. So this is actually an addition to the DCD department as far as when you go to vehicle count, and that's why we're bringing it forward to be considered.
I just want to say there can only be one.
So if no more questions on that, we'll move into the personal requests page. Again, this first top area are all personnel requests that have already been approved by council, and we have advertised and potentially have filled these positions. So the second half are all new requests. And again, I think I'll ask the mayor to kind of walk through these. But I do want to point out in the blue section here, the cost, the total cost, both broken up by the adopted or already kind of hired and the new personnel, just for your benefit.
Okay, thank you, Noah. So the first, adding a records evidence specialist to the police department. While this budget doesn't contemplate body cameras yet, we're headed there, and the chief and his staff are evaluating the different systems out there. And I think sometime next year, we'll bring back a recommendation for body cameras and what it's going to cost and what it's going to look like. So we need that person to be part of that, be hired and slightly ahead of that process. So that 59,000 represents someone starting mid-year next year to help with records in the police department, and in particular, the records that will be associated with body cameras as we move forward with that. We have a number, so we have removing and adding associate planners and senior planners. And so that's creating promotional opportunities for our associate planners to become senior planners. You'll see 2 of those there and increasing the salary range. We've come to a time in our city where we believe we need an additional mechanic. We have 1 mechanic, and currently his capacity is only our public works vehicles, and our police department is being serviced outside at local shops. And so we're spending about half of that mechanic's salary in outside shops. What we're not realizing though here is that when a police officer takes his car to a local garage, it takes 2 police officers to go there, drop that car off, and then they spend about 30 minutes gathering all the police items out of the car, then to go drive across town, go get our spare car, put him in that, and go on about his day. And then we have that same process at the end of the day. By bringing this in-house, we're going to be able to drop this off at our public works department. We'll have the spare car there. Just the officer involved in having his vehicle serviced will be involved in that transfer. So it creates tremendous efficiency in an area in the city that we're short-staffed right now. And it's just not an efficient way for our operation. We have a utility compliance specialist, and this will be a public works employee that is funded from the 3 enterprise funds, sewer, water, and storm. And 2 of these requirements are being driven by our operational permits. One, the water fund, it has to do with the backflow devices and inspecting and making sure that those are compliant. The storm water piece is illicit discharge. And many times when we go out and inspect businesses, we find modifications to floor drains and that are going into stormwater systems, and they shouldn't be. And then the last piece isn't permit driven, but we do have a number of situations throughout the year where grease from restaurant systems ending up on our sewer system. So this is a creation of a FOG program, which is fats, oils, and greases, and going out and inspecting these grease traps at restaurants. So one person will go to a business, inspect all 3 of these elements, and some of them are related to operational permits and others related to the safe operation of our sewer system. So that's a long explanation for that one, but I felt it was necessary. And the last one on this list, is an accounting position. We talked earlier this year with the Finance Committee about trying to do a utility assistance program with our opera money, and there just simply isn't bandwidth in our utility department to pull something like that off. And we are growing leaps and bounds, and we are adding new households and new utility accounts, and we need to get out in front of providing some bandwidth to our utility department to serve our existing customers and our new customers. Anybody want to have any questions about any of those employees before I get into the next few items? Okay, thank you. This mayor's vehicle stipend, with adding employees, we have parking challenges here. We'll call them challenges here at City Hall. So when we add employees and we add vehicles, sometimes they come with, not only do they bring their personal vehicles that we need to park around City Hall and we don't have enough parking, we also then sometimes purchase vehicles, city vehicles for them to drive. And with the addition of our new building official over in DCD, we were contemplating buying an electric car, the tune of about $40,000 for that. I'm not using the city car as frequently as I used to, but I will be driving, in particular in relation to my Association Washington City's duty. So it didn't make sense to buy and store another vehicle here at City Hall. The other elected officials, the mayors, county commissioners, all receive a vehicle stipend. So I'm going to step away from the city vehicle that you've been providing me. We're going to repurpose that to the building department, and then in turn provide me a stipend similar to the other elected officials in the county. The next item is the judge's contract. That will be becoming for you before the end of the year. We're working on those negotiations, and what I've identified is I've gone to the state salary commission. There's a website for that. And I believe that increase will be warranted in relation to what other judges are being paid. And so I'm taking that salary at our judges 60%, arriving at a new salary for our judge, which is $20,000 roughly more than he's currently making. And then I'll let Noah speak to salary and benefit cost projections. I think that is just the COLAs that we're going to be proposing and a lump sum related to our union negotiations. Questions on any of that? Okay, go ahead, Noah.
Okay. Then the last item, and Beck kind of brought this up earlier, these were the two items that were requested, but we did not include them in the funding with this budget request. And so I don't know if you want to talk about the Mile Hill Center or the game plan, I guess, for the body cameras.
Yeah, and so I think we talked at length about the Mile Hill study, and if there's resources and human resource capacity, I think we'll see that brought back hopefully mid-year. And then I'm confident we're heading towards body cameras. I just didn't want to put the dollars into the budget right now until we know what it is we're proposing. And so we will be bringing that back mid-year and discussing that with the council. But I just didn't want to put a plug number in there because it's a large number, and I'm not sure whether that's enough or it's way too much. And as we gather more information, Chief and I will be back to talk to you about this in detail.
Any discussion on those, or I'll move forward? Okay, so in your packet then, I just want to point this out because I'm running close to my timetable. What I've laid out here is the impact to each fund. And again, I'm gonna kind of walk through column by column, so you all can go back and kind of read this at your convenience and bring me any questions you have. But what we have in this first column is what was in the original budget adopted. Again, we'll take the current expense general fund as our example. So we originally budgeted roughly $3.975 million beginning fund balance. We budgeted $22 million worth of revenue, $24 million worth of expenses, netting and resulting in an ending fund balance for 2022 of $1.7 million. Okay, so that's the original budget. All the adjustments we just walked through on the expenditure side are being represented here on the expense. And we've adjusted beginning fund balance again, truing things up, truing up the fund balances. So adding an additional $2.9 million to our beginning fund balance, truing up particular revenues to roughly about $4.2 million. Again, the expenses being proposed, which results in an additional $1.5 million to our ending fund balance. So what you see in the far right column, the ending column, is what the amended budget would look like. So we would then have an ending fund balance as of 2022 with roughly $3.2 million in the general fund or in our 002 fund. Now, the one comment I'll make with this particular fund is that there are 3 restricted revenue sources included in this value. That is the remaining ARPA funds that have not been spent or have not been obligated part of this budget process. We have some rec reserve funds, and we have some affordable housing sales tax funds that are included in this number. So not the full amount is free cash flow, but a significant portion is. Councilmember Clausen?
Yeah, I just wanted for everyone's benefit and just cutting to the chase here. With the amendments that we've been talking about tonight, essentially we're adding both revenue and projects. And at the completion of this biennial budget at the end of 22, we're actually going to end up with more money than we started with. So I think that's just an important thing, that as you go through the different funds here and look at the adjustments made to the beginning, and more importantly, what that result is to the ending fund balance. So you can see that we're actually in pretty decent shape financially to be able to take on these extra tasks and still end the biennial budget with a pretty healthy financial picture. So it's kind of an editorial comment.
Councilmember
And I
Ashby.
would like, I would like to editorialize also. And what I wanted just to mention was, although we're increasing, I shouldn't say increasing, what we're doing for revenue in the general fund is we are recognizing the growth that we've had this year in sales tax dollars. And we're truing that up only to the revenue already collected. We did not increase the budget for anticipated increase in sales tax revenue next year. And sales tax revenue represents a little over 50% of the revenue the city has to work with. So not only will our fund balances be strong at the end of the modifications we're making, I believe at the end of the biennium, we will even be stronger if our sales tax growth continues to come in even modestly, as a modest percentage of what we've had the last 2 years. I guess what I'm saying is we're going to do a lot, but it's also a conservative adjustment to our budget.
That's well said, Beck. And that's why I'm confident that when we get better information about the body cameras, or we determine that we do have the human resources to take on another sub-area plan, I'm confident we're going to have the resources, the financial resources to do it also.
Well, and I would add to that, that not only are you going to be confident, but we'll have actual numbers to be able to look at so that we can confirm your confidence in it, Mayor. So, and I agree with you wholeheartedly.
So then I'll just keep us moving. So the next 3 pages, you can see each fund's impact. And again, feel free to, send us questions if you have it. But I want to pull you all the way back down to the next page. Again, if you have questions on any transfers is more of an internal accounting, moving kind of grant revenues in the right funds to account for those expenditures. So please take a look at that. Let me know if you do have any questions on the transfer sheet. But I was going to point your attention towards this, the actual biennial budget amendment, what it looked like when I bring it forward in the ordinance next week. The total impact is roughly $33 million of additional expenditure and revenue authority. So I just want to point that out to you because that's what you will see.
If I remember correctly, Noah, from a prior presentation of that 33, roughly 21 million dollars of that is other people's money, whether it's awards, grants, low interest loans. So I commend our staff on finding other people's money to fund the needs of our community.
And then that takes me to the end of the material I wanted to present. So again, I'm just going to open up to questions for the full council. And if I'll turn it back. Oh, wait, then we'll move on to the public
hearing.
comment. Okay. So is there any questions for the full council before we move to public comment and then close the hearing?
Fred, go ahead.
I just have a quick question. What are our reserves at?
It's a good question. And we have funded the additional reserves in this also.
Yeah, so great question. If you look to our general fund reserve account is our stabilization fund 003. As a part of this adjustment, you'll see I am bringing in additional revenue that is coming from the general fund, $360,000 to remain compliant with our policy of 17%. So you'll see our stabilization fund is shall be increased by that $360,000 again per policy, which is actually a really strong point to make, is that as we are adding staff and increasing these expenditures, we are continually setting aside additional money to ensure that we're accounting for that in our reserve funds. The other fund you can look to is our sorry, I was scrolling fast, is for the 412 water stabilization. Similarly, we're bringing in additional money there, not as much as needed, just due to the level of the impact. So you got 411, you have 422 storm drainage, another $26,000. And then of course our sewer stabilization, another $61,000. And those enterprise funds, the policy set by council is actually at 25%. So much stronger reserve policy on our enterprise funds. And again, with these adjustments, we are continuing to fund those policy targets. So another great result as you kind of look at the overall impact.
Thank you.
Other questions before I go to public comment? Okay, with that, we are conducting a public hearing. And Clerk Reinerson, are there any members of the public wishing to comment on this?
There are no members of the public at all attending this public hearing, so therefore there is no public comment.
All right, with that, then I will close the public hearing related to our mid-biennial review and modifications to the budget. Thank you, Noah. Good work.
Thank you.
All right, we're at item 2 and almost exactly on time. Noah only took 3 extra minutes. I was concerned he was going to take 2 hours. So we're at the ratification of adopted Kitsap countywide planning policies. This is Mr. Bond's item.
Yes, good evening, council and mayor. And I'm going to try to shave those 3 minutes off my presentation here. You say it can't be done in less than 15, but we'll see. Before you tonight for review are the draft countywide planning policies for Kitsap County. And as a reminder, we currently have countywide planning policies and they've been in place for the past 6 or 8 years. And we have to update them in advance of every comprehensive plan update cycle. The Growth Management Act requires that counties coordinate and that our comprehensive plans be coordinated. And we do this by creating countywide planning policies, which all jurisdictions essentially agree to comply with. There's also the multi-county planning policies, which is one step up that includes Pierce, Snohomish, and King County, as well as Kitsap County. And the regional growth strategy that is created by Puget Sound Regional Council is called Vision 2050. It was adopted about 18 months ago, and the countywide planning policies have been updated to be consistent with Vision 2050 and are excuse me, I'm just plugging in my computer because I'm getting a blinking light that says my battery is dying. So in any event, the KRCC is the body that is tasked with updating the countywide planning policies. And we have been working for almost 2 years to draft updates to both implement Vision 2050 and help plan Kitsap County for the coming 20-year planning period. So okay, I'm plugged in. The city is required to update its comprehensive plan by June 30th of 2024. And in order to perform that update, we will have to review the countywide planning policies plus Vision 2050 and make sure that our local plan is consistent with both of those documents. So tonight, we are providing the countywide planning policies to you for review. They have been adopted by Kitsap County Commissioners and by the KRCC board. And I wanted to mention that Mayor Patanzu, Councilmember Ashby, and Councilmember Rosa Pepe have all been instrumental in creating those policies, as has Councilmember John Clausen wearing his Kitsap Transit hat. So, sorry, I just had to walk into the other room here. The countywide planning policies require, after the Kitsap County Commissioners act to vote on approval of the countywide planning policies, they have to be ratified by both the tribe and 3 out of the 4 cities in Kitsap County. At this time, no cities have taken action on this, but it is expected that at least 3 out of the 4 will vote to approve them. We are proposing to bring these forward for ratification on the November 10th City Council meeting in about 3 weeks. Just to touch on the items that have been updated in this current cycle, really the main issues that came out of Puget Sound Regional Council had to do with housing equity and social justice, as well as climate change. And so you will see in the draft document that there are significant new policies that we are required to address those issues in our local comprehensive plans. I don't think those were the particularly difficult issues to get through at Kitsap Regional Coordinating Committee. I think there was general consensus on most of those chapters. I think where the disagreements were and where we had to spend a lot of time sort of working through differences were on the centers of growth chapter, the urban growth areas chapter, and the rural chapter. The county took a pretty hard line on wanting to have something called rural centers, which would be rural areas of the county that are focused, that allow some amount of growth. We went back and forth, and ultimately, I think that the cities and commissioners and our elected officials all work together to come to a compromise. Likewise, on the urban growth area chapter in element B, we had quite a bit of disagreement, but we were able to reach some amount of consensus. And I think it is going to be difficult to expand the urban growth areas, but at the same time, the regional strategy also it calls for basically stable urban growth boundaries. So it is our hope that we will not be asked to shrink our urban growth boundaries again, but we are looking at some options for annexation just in case at this time. The other area that we really spent a lot of time working on was the centers element, which is element C. Element C is pretty well dictated by Puget Sound Regional Council in that there is a hierarchy of centers. There's regional centers, there's countywide centers, and there are local centers and military installations. And there are subcategories of each of those that focus on employment versus housing. We have proposed a number of centers in our comprehensive plan previously. We will have to make sure that our centers meet these new criteria as part of our next comprehensive plan update cycle. So tonight, this is mostly just to give you the draft document. I believe there was a hyperlink in the staff report that would take you to a red line version of the countywide planning policies that the county had prepared. And so if you want to look at the before and after, that red line copy does exist. The city council doesn't have the ability to change the countywide planning policies at this point without just simply torpedoing the entire process by voting no to ratify the amendments. And so it's an up or down vote on the countywide planning policies. And based on the 2 years of work that we've done, the staff recommendation is going to be to approve this. And we're asking that you put this on the agenda for November 10th.
Before I call on Councilmember Clausen and Ashby, I just want to acknowledge Beck and her role as the chair of KRCC. She was intimately involved in the negotiations with the county. Her and I had a sit down with multiple, I think, sit downs with Commissioner Gilder to resolve an impasse we had. So I thank you, Beck, for your hard work on this. And with that, I'll call on you and then Councilmember Clausen, since you have your hands raised, and then Councilmember Diener.
Okay, what I wanted to say is, Nick, you mentioned draft CPPs or a draft update. This is no longer a draft. This is the CPPs for adoption. And like you said, it's a thumbs up or a thumbs down. What I would invite our council to do, and this is just in relationship to Port Orchard's comprehensive plan update that will be happening, is to pay attention to the appendix rather than element C. Pay real close attention to element or appendix. Again, it's also appendix C, which really defines the various centers of growth and what they're going to look like within the county and our candidate centers and moving them up to county-wide centers. The other piece that I would just like to make everyone aware of is Appendix E in the document we were provided is the interlocal agreement for KRCC. What's in our packet is outdated. I'm assuming that when these are fully ratified, that appendix will be updated to the current ILA.
Okay, thank you, Beck. Councilmember Clausen.
Yeah, I initially wanted to echo Mayor's comments about Beck and recognize, I think Beck needs more than just a simple thank you. As the chair of KRCC, I mean, as Mayor said, there was a lot of negotiations going on because, as you can imagine, everybody has their opinion. But the thing that I wanted to really recognize is that Beck drug us all through a very detailed, very tedious, every one of these elements, and got concurrence on every step through this process. And you talk about herding cats. I mean, this was the participants of herding cats, because you get all of the different jurisdictions that are part of the CPPs to sit down and look at and go through every element and get concurrence. That's a major monumental feat. So I just wanted to really recognize Beck did an outstanding job. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. It's been a journey, and we're almost to the finish line. And I'm looking forward to the completion or the ratification by 3 cities in the tribe. Thank you.
Councilmember Diener.
I also wanted to, I concur with what John did. I couldn't say it better. So thank you, Beck, for all your hard work. I'm also pleased to see that there is an equity inclusion into the various policies. I'm curious about how we will make those findings with various policy matters. So I expect that we'll be talking more about the equity and inclusion components to the policies, but it's good that those made their way into discussions. And I think, Beck, you were a part of that as well. And I would speak to that piece just a little bit. Is
when we added the equity elements, and they're kind of scattered throughout the document, we have a lot of the word should in there rather than shall. And we had a lengthy discussion on that. And the reason that the group concurred that they should be shoulds and not shalls is we haven't experienced them yet. So we are trying to create policies, and we needed a starting point, and we didn't want to start them with a shall. We needed to start them with a should to see how they filtered through all of our jurisdictions and the work we have to do on equity.
Thank you. That's all that I have, but thanks, Beck, and I appreciate that discussion. I think it's a good first step. We started talking about it soon after Black Lives Matter, and so we're on our way. Thank you.
Councilmember Rosepepe.
Yes, I know that Beck isn't going for sainthood, but I would like, besides echoing John's comments, having seen her in action as an alternate a couple of times, we know that some people that sit on committees kind of look out for their own jurisdiction. And I can honestly say, looking at Beck in action and our mayor, they look at it holistically and to the benefit of all. So that is greatly appreciated. And I think that that will show up as we move forward with the pieces on equity there, Scott. I feel very assured of that. So thank you very much, Beck, for your hard work.
Councilmember Clausen.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out one thing, and as Beck just very well said, we went through that language and we talked about should, shall. That was the level of detail that she brought us through successfully to the completion. So I just wanted to, that was another example. Thank you again.
Well done. Very well done. All right. Nick only gave us back 2 of the 3 minutes that he promised us. So, but we got close. So anything else on this, Nick?
No, well, I would also just like to thank Councilmember Ashby because she has made my job a whole lot easier. And I'm not sure which one of you is going to be stepping into this KRCC role next year, but you've got big shoes to fill. So thank you, Beck, for your work on this.
Again, my pleasure. And we all need to compliment Nick too, because Port Orchard was very well represented at the technical level.
Yes, that's true. And it'll take a village to replace Beck, but we're going to do it. We have to. All right, we're going to move on to item 3, a special events ordinance. And this is going to take 3 people. Clerk Reinerson, our city attorney, and our police chief.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, Council. I believe I'm going to go ahead and start the presentation, and then the chief and or city legal counsel will chime in after me. So I just want to remind the council that the reason that this is before you tonight is that throughout the summer, council was presented some street closure approvals for certain events, and then questioned why not all of them were coming before you for approval. So council requested that the Economic Development Tourism Committee review Port Orchard Municipal Code 5.94 special events to better clarify the requirement of council approval for road closures, and also to give the opportunity for other sections of that code to be updated. So at the August 9th, 2021 Economic Development Committee meeting, the committee reviewed the code of special events and recommended that staff provide a red line version that indicated that the city will no longer allow multiple day vendor fair events along the waterfront, and then also required that all of the street and highway closures be approved by the city council. Staff did bring back those red line versions at the September 13, 2021 Economic Development Committee meeting. In addition, staff reviewed the code as well and provided some changes to the application as well as to the code. Some of those changes were to include the word including estimated peak attendance on the application, although we did identify or ask the applicant to identify how many they estimate would attend, but what is the peak attendance, which makes a big difference when law enforcement is trying to provide a safety plan. We also want to include that we require the applicant to identify if certain structures would be present, such as adding temporary structures, trucks, and sanitation facilities on that application and on a map. In addition, to include evidence of Department of Public Health approval. We did state in our code that it's routed to them, but we should clarify that we should have approval or evidence from the health department approving their event when it comes with having food vendors. In addition, staff is asking that we add hand washing stations to be identified on the detailed map as well. Under processing applications related to the police department authority, we wish to add with necessary public safety and traffic control provisions. This came out of some discussions that we had internally with staff, making sure that that law enforcement's focus is on public safety, and then traffic control is handled by third party. In preparing for this meeting, staff reviewed the code again. And we are also recommending that the city aligns its standards for holding special events with FEMA's special events contingency plan job aid manual. The additional changes are to include that the requirement to be in addition would be to include a requirement that would require written confirmation of procurement and adequate sanitation facilities for the event, as recommended by FEMA. The other addition would to include language that the applicant, upon the release of the police chief's public safety plan for the event, may need to contract for vendor services such as aid, emergency services, and or security based on the estimated number of attendants. So with that, staff recommends that you approve the changes and have this be brought before the council at the next council meeting for approval. I do believe that the police chief may want to have some comments, and legal counsel may have some comments as well.
Chief or Charlie, whoever's first.
I'll go first, real briefly to contextualize. So Brandy mentioned that staff audited our application form, and as we've discussed previously, this activity was designed in large part to modernize and to bring up to current day expectations with regards to safety and sanitation, those requirements of applicants. The application form is obviously a document applicants receive. The code is our transparent way of notifying applicants of what's going to be expected of them in their event. So the code modifications match the additional information that staff is requesting or recommending that the council require of these applicants. This is our attempt to sort of do a strategic pinpoint and modification of the code to reflect the additional information that the chief, fire, all the different and sanitation, all the different organizations are now needing in order to ensure that or have always needed, but we want to ensure that it's transparent as to applicants, or transparent to applicants, so they know what is expected, what information, what vendors, the larger expectations of each vendor when they submit, so there aren't surprises when they get a public safety plan that, for example, calls for flaggers. That's now in the code flagged for them. Pun unintended. So.
Chief, anything to add before we?
For the first time, I'm speechless. Clerk Reinerson and Ms. Archer have completely encapsulated everything that I was hoping to say. So thank you.
Okay. Questions for the council? I know this came forward from our Economic Development Committee, I believe, asked that we look at this. So Councilmember Diener.
So, you know, I'm supportive of these changes, but one thing I would ask in the staff report at the next meeting is that we talk a little bit about why we're not recommending that we continue to allow multi-day vendor applications and why we need these things thought out for public safety a little bit better so that the public can understand the decision-making behind this.
I think that a bit needs to come from you guys because this was at the council's direction, some of these changes. So,
The public safety recommendations, we absolutely can. If council this evening wants to speak to the multi-day events, that would be helpful.
Councilmember Clausen?
Well, for the most part, I'm supportive, but I'm trying to have a better understanding of exactly what all of this means. And Scott, I think, brought one of my concerns up of, this issue of multi-day events. And I'm not quite sure how is that going to impact. I don't know that we have too many that I can think of that are multi-day. The only ones I could think of would be, there's been occasions where the farmer's market has gone more than one day. So I'm not quite sure how that's going to affect what, I know the last 2 years have been pretty difficult, but prior to COVID, how is that going to affect what we normally see come to Port Orchard? And then the other question is are we unique in this, or is this pretty similar to what other communities? I know a lot of it is just transparency and making sure everybody knows what's going on, but there seems to be some level of restrictions that are coming that we haven't had before.
So I saw Councilmember Gucciardi and Councilmember Ashby and then Lucarelli, but I'm going to let Councilmember Ashby speak because she's probably going to speak to her logic on the multi-day events. I'm hopeful.
Yeah, well, yes, I brought that forward, and I want to make a clarification first. As as Clerk Reinerson indicated, this came forth to an economic development meeting in September, I believe. And at that meeting, I can't remember who was in attendance, but it was not robustly attended. And we just moved it forward for work study, which is what we're seeing tonight. I guess what I'm trying to say is this was not deliberated significantly or in depth at economic development. Is that correct, Sean? Is that how you remember it?
Yes, but I do believe in attendance was Chamber Director Matt and Corrine Haydock
Yes.
was there as well. So they were providing input from the business communities down there.
Right. And I was the one who brought forth the idea of having our events on the waterfront, one-day events. I was not necessarily recommending that all events, say somebody wanted to use some of our fields for a soccer tournament or a baseball tournament, which would be over a weekend, not concerned about that. And what I want to say is our real successful events downtown have always been on Sundays. And I would refer to the cruise, I would refer to the Mustang show, I would refer to the Taste of Port Orchard. Some of those have always been one-day events. When we start closing the waterfront also on Saturdays, I think that impacts our businesses, and it also displaces our farmers market when we have two-day weekend events down on the waterfront. And quite honestly, when we opened up this, was it May or June, we started accepting applications for events this year. We received at least 3 to 4 week-long or weekend-long applications. It was all of a sudden groups were wanting to monopolize the waterfront. And I think that was kind of what I reacted to. I thought our successful events are one day. And we traditionally have had the farmers market on Saturdays. And quite honestly, the vendor fairs that have been down there the last several years have not been of a quality that I think our city deserves.
Thank you for that clarification, Beck. Councilmember Cacciardi?
We've been again going back and forth with economic development, which is a point of clarification for Brandy under section 5.94.080 subsection 1, page 112. We list that we're changing that fee for the parking lot, and it will be set by resolution of city council. That's yet to occur, correct?
Correct. That would be part of your larger fee resolution. We're trying to,
Yep.
every time we come across a reference to a fee in the code, we're trying to shift that to your fee resolution. So they're
Yeah.
all in one location.
Exactly. I just wanted to remind the council that that would be a change as made in this document. That $300 fee has been there for many years.
Okay, good catch. Councilmember Lucarelli?
Well, we have had actually successful events in the past that were multi-day, including Cedar Cove Days, if you recall. That was about 3 to 5 day event. And I don't want to have it so that a multi-day event would not be considered at all, but maybe lean in the direction of saying preference is for a single day event. I think we could actually, that might be problematic, just saying that there's no way we could have multi-day events. And I'm wondering, how much was this vetted with groups like Fathoms of Fun and such?
Could I just interject real quick, Cindy,
Yeah,
to
go
what
ahead.
you said? And that is, most of our event applications are administratively approved. I know I would be acceptable to multi-day events requiring council approval rather than administratively approved.
Right, I agree. That makes sense to me as well. What happens with these changes now is that events are going to be much more expensive to put on, and we'll see, I think, far fewer of them with all of the new requirements with flaggers and everything else. So it'll be interesting to see what will happen in the next year or so, because I think there'll be quite a few less events that take place in the city, and perhaps that's the direction people want to go. I'm not sure.
Thanks for your comments. Councilmember Chang?
Yeah, I just wanted to add to what's been said before, that part of the reason for the reservations about multi-day vendor affairs is that we've found that as many of the merchants and restaurants on Bay Street have actually become more successful, closing down the street impacts their business, both in terms of traffic, bringing people to their venues, and taking away needed parking. And so when we thought about some of the multi-vendor, like during the day, we noticed that some of the vendors didn't take all the space, even though they closed Bay Street. They might only take one of the blocks instead of both. So we just wanted a little more oversight to make sure that if we really are closing down the streets, taking away parking from the stores and the restaurants, unfortunately, the vendors are not always complementing the existing brick and mortar stores. There is a definite conflict there. We just wanted to have that extra, or I felt that it would be good to have a little more discussion and analysis of what was coming in whenever we close the street.
Thanks for your comments. Councilmember Chang or Clausen?
Yeah, I have a little bit of concern similar to Cindy and Beck. I think your suggestion is an excellent one. You know, if we're going to be multi-day, but not let's close the door on them completely with our actions here. And the only other thing, and I very much appreciate the impact to our businesses downtown, but hopefully there's a benefit to these events that go beyond simply that. I mean, I hope that the community at large benefits from these festivals and activities. And I hope to some extent that these events are bringing in people from outside of our area, that tourists, if you will, to Port Orchard. Not that that's a big piece of our livelihood, but it is an impact. And so it's just, I wanted us to think about how this is going to impact the community at large as well. So that's all. Thank you.
Councilmember Rose Pepe? You're muted, Jay.
Sorry about that. I like Beck's suggested change. Anecdotally, unless Brandy wants to weigh in, the LTAC committee is meeting on the 28th. So we'll have some information on what type of events people are planning for in 2022, which will be helpful to also take a look at on that. But I still support Beck's change.
Councilmember Diener.
Sorry about that. Sean had mentioned that POPSA and the chamber came and they must have had something to say, and I'd like to understand what they had to say about the proposal. And I also agree that we should not foreclose on multi-day events.
Yeah, and that was kind of be my next comment, Scott, is, we are hearing more and more, and Fred made that point. Fred's also on that committee, that as these businesses are becoming more and more successful downtown, they're finding that these festivals are actually becoming a pretty serious detriment to that. And so that's a theme that we are hearing more and more at every single Economic Development Council meeting. We invite those stakeholder groups to the meeting. We talk about current opportunities, current challenges. So that is something that seems to be repeated. I do like Beck's suggestion about bringing these multi-day events to the council. And then I think, somehow we as a council should make an extra effort to reach out to those business owners most impacted, right? I mean, they're most impacted. So almost like a conditional use permit, right? We almost have to notify them and get them involved, because that's who I personally want to hear from most, because they're really directly impacted. And I just want to make sure that, we're hearing all sides and doing what's best for as many people as possible. But there's definitely have been a groundswell of concern as things are getting busier down there, as our city continues to grow. And so it's just something we should keep our ear close to.
Did POPSA and Chamber, did they come out in support of the multi-day event ban?
They didn't have an opinion.
We didn't, I don't think we took a vote, but they were engaged in the conversation, and I don't remember anybody disagreeing with that. And so I would say that the lack of disagreement kind of showed their general support of the idea. Beck, Fred, am I missing something?
I have to say that all meetings after a while kind of blend together. And I'm having trouble remembering that particular conversation. I do remember us saying, this is fine for us to take to work study to get the entire council's input on it. I remember that very clear. And so that's kind of what we're doing now. And again, I've appreciated all the comments and the concerns. Yeah. And hopefully we have a good resolution.
And hopefully we'll get more testimony when this comes before us.
So what I'm hearing is you'd like to see what was presented tweaked in a manner that it's not that we're banning multi-day events, but that they must come before the full city council for approval, and as well as street closures. So, okay. Is staff clear on how we need to tweak this? All right, we'll get it done and bring it back. All right, we got there. It's only 8:08. We're to the last item, which is the personnel policy update for COVID vaccinations as a condition of employment. And council asked we bring this back, and I'm not complete. I know there were a couple of questions raised that I think Debbie and Charlie are prepared to answer. Beyond that, it's for you to deliberate. So Debbie, go ahead.
Not sure what all you want me to start with. I was asked though to contact some other agencies that had indicated they had initiated some type of vaccination requirement. A number of agencies have just gone, with every employee, not just new hires. But the ones I was able to get a hold of have been doing this since at least August, and specifically related to new hires requiring the vaccination. That none of the agencies I reached out to or that got back to me this week have had any issue with that. They have not seen any impact, in their opinion, as to their recruitment efforts. And they have seen no request for accommodation from those new hires. All of their new hires have been fully vaccinated. So I know that was one of the questions. I'm not sure what else you might want me to address.
The other question was related to legal risk. And I think Charlie's prepared to speak with that. And I don't think we got a definitive answer. I think every claim is different. And it'll be evaluated.
Hold on. Legal risk, obviously, we can't discuss that in an open meeting. So we could head into executive session if council had questions regarding insurance coverage or legal risks associated with the program. Absolutely happy to discuss that. I know Debbie, as she mentioned, has anecdotal evidence from other agencies. We have things that don't relate to legal risk, but we have, a few more data points that we're all aware of through the media of agencies utilizing not necessarily pre-employment vaccination policies, but other forms of vaccination policies. We know agencies began terminating folks yesterday in conformance with the state's order. We know 2 pieces of litigation are still active, one out of Walla Walla and one in Spokane in federal district court. So those are all data points that don't necessarily speak to your legal risk, but I'm happy to talk about legal risk in an exec session. And I know Debbie can answer application questions and implementation questions in open session. If the questions start to stray towards legal risk of the application, then I say we head to exec session.
Okay. Councilmember Clausen.
Charlie, I heard in regards to the legal risk, I just heard recently the state attorney general who successfully dealt with this in court, and he had indicated that, and I wish I remembered the number, that this is like the 45th or 50th case that has been brought against the state over the mandatory vaccine issue, and all of them except this last one, there was a bit of an outlier on. The issue of legality has been hands down determined by many courts. Did I hear that correctly, or do you know?
I believe as a matter of reporting the fact that the Attorney General is opining that the policy will survive judicial scrutiny. I believe the state attorney general has made that statement in support of the governor. I absolutely know the city attorney of Seattle has made that statement in multiple circumstances related to their vaccination policy, which does include a pre-hire vaccination requirement. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but those legal authorities are stating those things. Yeah.
Yeah, and I mainly responded, in the last couple council meetings, we've had public comment where they've indicated that it's definitely against the Constitution, against the law, blah, blah, blah. And so far from what I'm hearing in the majority of the cases, including what the state attorney general has said, is that the legality of the mandatory portion of the vaccine has been upheld. So, and then just for the rest of the council, if you're interested, I did a real quick summary of, what kind of percentages that for those who have implemented the mandatory vaccine. Now, this isn't the pre-employment type of thing, but I've got some percentages if the council's interested in, including one of them that we talked before was the transit system in Thurston County, Olympia. They just got to their date that everybody had to be vaccinated or whatever. And I've got percentages of how many of their people as others. So
and that's really a separate issue than that's a vaccine mandate where we're talking about pre-employment vaccine requirement, which is a different animal a little bit.
I agree, but the only thing is that it appears that the majority of the folks are accepting the fact that they need to be vaccinated, as opposed to what was kind of suggested is that we may not be able to recruit a lot of applicants because of this mandatory vaccine for new hires. So that's all.
Fair point. Councilmember Diener?
Debbie, thank you for addressing the questions that I sent in earlier. I really appreciate you reaching out to the jurisdictions and seeing what you could find out. John, I think what I recall hearing was that there were just over 30 cases that were brought, and all were, except for maybe that one, were successful in their defense. But one of the things I just wanted to point out is the reason that this landed, for me, this landed at work study was, I don't think that the public, unless any of the public was a parliamentarian, would understand what we were trying to do last week. And so I felt that this was a prudent thing to do, not only to have more discussion, but also to kind of sever it from what was a confusing process, so that the public can see that we did hit the reset a bit, and that we're going to take this to back to full council debate. That's all.
Councilmember Rose Pepe.
Yeah, I think, Mayor, if you're looking for support to bring this back to council next week, I just want to give a thumbs up to bring this back for the rest of the council.
You already took action and it is on the agenda.
Okay, thanks.
Your action at the last council meeting directed us to have it here at the work study and then bring it forward.
That's what I did. That's why I wasn't sure. But for the rest of the council, and I know it's not the end all be all, but the SHRM database, which is used quite a bit by HR folks, has a lot of information on pre-employment mandates on vaccines, and it's all positive. And I would encourage us to move forward with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Councilmember Ashby.
Yes. My concerns, because I was one of the council members that voted no when it was originally brought forth to council. And part of that was because not all of the questions that we had asked earlier had been answered. And the questions I had all would require executive session. So I would prefer that either this evening or before we take a vote at our next meeting.
I think the most convenient thing, since we have no public, would be to stop the recording here and conduct our executive session. And then Mr. Proctor and Mr. Bond and Chief Brown can probably all go home because this is our last business item. So Clerk Reinerson or Ms. Floyd, could you stop the recording and our live stream?
Before you stop the recording, can we announce that we'll be going into executive session pursuant to RCW 4230-110, subpart 1, subpart I, to discuss legal risks of a proposed action when public discussion is likely to result in adverse legal or financial consequence. And I believe we'll be going into executive session for 10 minutes with no action to follow.
I got a quick question real quick. When we leave, do we need to end or
we will
end and leave, or
we will
just leave it up and go to the other link?
Yeah, there's no link. Because we have no public, I think we're safe to conduct this here once we stop the recording.
Okay, thank you.
Don't leave, Jay.
So don't go anywhere. Stay where you're at.
Can you remind us, is it, we don't have to go to the other link?
No, don't go anywhere. We're gonna
Great,
stay right here.
great.
Just stop the
Okay.
recording.
Great.
Yep. All
And
right.
Charlie, I just want to confirm
Are we
that,
still live on YouTube?
yeah, I think she's doing that next.